In Belgium, our central bank has been very busy shifting its reserves to the Belgian treasury and loading the risks of the new experiment on the shoulders of their shareholders. So I wanted to invite all of you, and also you, Mr. Loones, to become a shareholder of the Central Bank of Belgium. The stock is now quoting at about 10% of its real underlying value, and to join me to ask some interesting questions to those people on the general meeting of shareholders, which will be held on the 3rd Monday of May this year. It's a very interesting and unreal event. So I'd like to see you there. Dr. Stark, you mentioned the unlimited financial resources of the European Central Bank, but I don't think it's about unlimited financial resources. I think it's about credibility. And I wonder if the ECB directors realize that their credibility has limits. And then a second short question. You also spoke, Mr. Stark, about the possibility of an abrupt correction which would lead to a new crisis. But in my opinion, and that's also what I think I heard in the underlying message that you all sent today, it is not a new crisis we're going to face, it's just the next phase of an ongoing crisis. Thank you.
Mr. Stark.
Thank you first for the invitation to come back to Brussels. We will see. I will start with your last part of your question, with the last question on the crisis. We are facing a multifaceted crisis. I said in my statement, it's not only the debt crisis anymore. We have an institutional crisis. We have additional crisis with refugees. Now the Brexit discussion. Today, in another building here in Brussels, Greece will be discussed again. So the situation in Greece can escalate any day again. So the crisis has not been resolved. We are still in crisis mode. And I'm really surprised to learn from market participants, from financial market participants arguing the crisis in Europe is over. It is not over. Maybe they see it as being over because of the interventions by the central bank, by the ECB, overshadowing the real problems. Or it's all underwater, as Mr. van der Cloot said. It's underwater, not visible. And not in particular not visible for policymakers. On the self-assessment by the ECB, and I think it's a matter of fact that the central bank has, in principle, unlimited resources. It is the only institution which creates money, which can create money within the system with the commercial banks together. But I agree with you that the most important asset of a central bank is credibility and trust. So to be credible in its operations, to be in line with the mandate, and to achieve the goals which are mentioned in the statutes of the central bank and in the European context in the treaty. And it's also about the democratic legitimacy, to pursue more than one objectives. And I mentioned that the primary objective is to deliver on price stability, to deliver on more, to be more ambitious, and to try to achieve more objectives. For this, there is no democratic legitimacy anymore. I would like to add another point. You mentioned credibility. I mentioned legitimacy, and I have to mention also trust vis-à-vis the people.
If you become a shareholder, we will see, Mr. Stark. At least you already have the green tie, so you match with the green cap of meneer Genen. Other questions in the room, unless someone else of the panel would like to intervene on the issue. Yes.
Hallo, mein Name ist Guntram Pross und ich arbeite im Parlament. Ich hätte eine Frage an Herrn Professor Stark. Zuerst möchte ich mich aber natürlich dafür bedanken, dass Sie hierher gekommen sind und den äußerst aufschlussreichen Vortrag gehalten haben. Nun zu meiner Frage. Und zwar hat in einem Brief vor einigen Tagen Herr Draghi erwähnt, dass es ein mögliches Austrittsszenario quasi gibt, oder das hat er erwähnt, aus der Eurozone. Relativ zeitgleich ungefähr wurde auch bekannt, dass der Bankensektor sich darauf vorbereitet, auf eben ein solches Szenario. Und natürlich ist jetzt gerade Draghis Aussage ein enormer Wandel quasi, da er davor immer nur darauf referiert hat, dass es eben ein solches Szenario in einem Vertrag gar nicht vorgesehen ist. Die Antwort war natürlich, oder war zwar an 2 italienische Abgeordnete gerichtet, aber natürlich hat das Ganze auch Auswirkungen weit darüber hinaus, über Italien hinaus, auf die ganze Eurozone. Und deswegen würde ich Sie ganz gerne fragen, oder mich würde interessieren, wie denn Sie die Antwort eben sehen, auf die ganze Eurozone bezogen. Vielen Dank.
The interesting question of the day, most actual question, can you leave the Eurozone, and the recent declaration on that topic of Mr. Draghi. It would be interesting to hear perhaps the views of the several panelists. But first, Mr. Stark, please.
I would like to answer in German, if you permit. Yes, Mr. Draghi made this remark in his response.
That's special German. That's special German.
Oh, okay.
My German is really good. I understood all of it.
Okay, also second try. Also Herr Draghi hat in der Antwort auf die Anfrage zweier italienischer Abgeordneter des Europäischen Parlaments diesen Hinweis gegeben: Wenn ein Land das Eurosystem verlässt, werden Forderungen und Assets, also Claims and Liabilities gegenüber der EZB, sie müssen im Grunde genommen gesettelt werden, es muss ausgeglichen werden. Dies betrachte ich als eine politische Botschaft an italienische Politiker, als ein Signal, wehe dem, es gibt eine stärkere Bewegung in Italien, die den Austritt aus dem Eurogebiet programmatisch weiter voranbringt, dann droht damit auch die Fälligkeit all der Verpflichtungen gegenüber Tage 2. Das ist die politische Botschaft. Es ist auch deshalb eine politische Botschaft, weil Herr Draghi nicht notwendigerweise auf diesen Hinweis hätte machen müssen. Das war gar nicht die Anfrage. Also hat diesen Weg genutzt, um diese politische Botschaft zu schicken. Was nicht in diesen beiden Sätzen oder in diesem einen Satz enthalten ist, ist die Frage, wann denn diese Einlösung erfolgen soll. Das bleibt offen. Sicherlich nicht, wenn es zu einem solchen Fall kommt, sicherlich nicht am Tag des Austritts. Das ist ein Signal natürlich auch an alle anderen Mitgliedstaaten. Und ich darf hinzufügen, dass eine Gelegenheit im Juli 2015 versäumt wurde, Ballast aus dem Euroraum abzuwerfen. Ich sage es bewusst so provokativ. Die Finanzminister der Eurogruppe waren mehrheitlich der Meinung, dass Griechenland sein Schicksal außerhalb des Währungsraums des Euro finden solle, zumindest für eine bestimmte Zeit. Und diese Position wurde von den Staats- und Regierungschefs wiederum zunichte gemacht.
Interesting idea indeed to remark the fact that Mr. Draghi had no specific reason to make this declaration, but felt inclined to do so. But to complement Meneer van der Cloot.
Well, I showed the target balances between countries, and part of our problems is that people cannot understand that apparently. And I even explained it one time for the camera of the Belgian newspaper, The Tijd, and I noticed that they didn't publish it. Apparently it's unexplainable to the general public. And that's one of our big problems. We need to find ways to translate things which are hugely important to the general public. One of these things that could imply is that some citizens in the Eurozone could be on the hook for more than 100 billion because of the spending of other people somewhere else in the Eurozone. And it is being said, no, it will not happen because the monetary union will continue forever, so this will balance out. I'm currently reading some books about the founding fathers of the US, in Jefferson and Hamilton. The big Hamilton moment was very early on in the creation of the United States of America, that they made this big push to federalize all debts of the states, and there was a big thing because they had to pay a price for making that possible, and one of these things was that Washington was created. The capital was moved to Washington because of that. Well, that was the big moment that people said there was a consensus, we needed to do that. In Europe, we debated these things in the parliament, and there wasn't a consensus, there wasn't a majority. In reality, people would say, okay, there is no majority, it will not happen. In Europe, then we do it by the back door. And that's, we can do as if it's not happened, it has happened. And you could see it as the evil, the original sin of the the Eurozone. It will haunt us forever. This thing will be on our table again and again. In my book, Reckless, I make this position that if we don't transform the monetary union in Europe, it will not last. And will that mean that some countries will leave the Eurozone? Well, if we keep very tough in Brussels and say everybody has to, we won't make adjustments, well, then we will create disaster zones. We have been creating disaster zones because of the creation of the monetary union in some places in Europe. In my view, that's hardly sustainable in the long run. Think about the social cohesion in Europe at the moment, and we are already, if technically we are in good business conditions today. You could call it cyclical wise. We are at a peak. We won't see better times in the near future again. Now we will have a correction in the coming periods. Well, if even at the peak things are like this, what will? So there will be a new crisis. It's just an absurd question. Will there be a new crisis? Of course, there will be a new crisis. Human history is about a consequence of crisis and recoveries after crisis. So there will be a new crisis. So if we don't adjust our system, it will get to haunt us forever. Thank you.
Professor Lucke?
Ja, ich werde mal auch Deutsch sprechen. Also ich muss sagen, ich war perplex, als ich diesen Satz gelesen habe in dem Brief an die italienischen Abgeordneten. Und zwar deshalb, weil ich zwar völlig mit dem übereinstimme, was Herr Stark gerade gesagt hat über die Drohung, die mit diesem Satz ausgesprochen wird gegenüber Abgeordneten der Fünf-Sterne-Bewegung, von denen man ja weiß, dass sie mit ihrer Bewegung zumindest verbal dafür streiten, dass Italien aus dem Euro austritt. Aber es ist dennoch eben sehr interessant, dass dieser Satz dasteht, weil wir nicht nur bedenken müssen, was in dem Satz drinsteht, sondern auch bedenken müssen, was nicht gesagt wurde. Gerade angesichts der Tatsache, dass zuvor Draghi immer und geradezu gebetsmühlenartig betont hat, dass ein Austritt aus der Eurozone gar nicht möglich ist, gar nicht vorgesehen ist, dass so etwas gar nicht diskutiert wird, ist es doch bemerkenswert zu sagen, dass er das jetzt nicht sagt. Also wenn ich es ein ganz klein bisschen vielleicht überdehne, steht in dem Satz drin, ich bestreite ja gar nicht das Recht, aus der Eurozone auszutreten. Jedenfalls, also er hat nicht das Recht bestritten, aus der Eurozone auszutreten, so wie er das normalerweise getan hat, sondern er hat nur faktisch gesagt, wenn ein Staat aus der Eurozone austritt, dann hat das bestimmte Konsequenzen. Und auch das, was in diesem Satz jetzt wirklich drin steht, unterstellt ja gewissermaßen, dass die nationale Zentralbank nach wie vor nicht nur eine Autonomie, sondern fast eine gewisse Souveränität hat. Das unterstellt ja sozusagen, die nationale Zentralbank oder meinetwegen der Staat, dessen Zentralbank das nun einmal ist, kann aus der Eurozone austreten und ist dann ein Rechtssubjekt mit bestimmten Rechten und Pflichten gegenüber der Europäischen Zentralbank. Das heißt, es wird eine gewisse Souveränität hier unterstellt der nationalen Zentralbank und er steckt auch sozusagen ab, was mit dieser Souveränität verbunden ist, nämlich man muss den Zahlungsverpflichtungen, die sich aus der vorherigen Zugehörigkeit zum Eurosystem ergeben haben, diesen Zahlungsverpflichtungen muss man gerecht werden. Und das, finde ich, ist ein ganz bemerkenswerter Veränderung in der Tonlage der Europäischen Zentralbank gegenüber Begehren oder Vorschlägen oder Anregungen, dass möglicherweise eine nationale Zentralbank aus dem Eurosystem ausscheiden könnte. Und ich sehe es ähnlich wie der Fragesteller, auch so, dass das auffällig ist, angesichts der Tatsache, dass wenige Tage vorher eben auch Banken ganz offen gesagt haben, sie machen einen Plan B für den Fall, dass vielleicht irgendein Land oder auch mehrere Länder aus der Eurozone austreten. Jetzt möchte ich zum zweiten Punkt kommen, und das ist die Frage, wie kräftig ist da eigentlich die Drohung? Das ist mir ehrlich gesagt noch nicht klar. Also Italien hat zurzeit, glaube ich, Target 2 Verbindlichkeiten in der Größenordnung von ungefähr 320 Milliarden Euro.
Exactly.
Und wenn die Italiener jetzt aus dem Euro austreten sollten, dann sagt Herr Draghi, dann müsst ihr 320 Milliarden Euro an die Europäische Zentralbank zahlen. Aber wie macht die nationale Zentralbank das eigentlich? Denn sie kann ja dann Euro nicht mehr emittieren, sondern sie würde dann Lira emittieren. Es kann ja eigentlich nur so funktionieren, dass die italienische Zentralbank dann mit frisch emittierter Lire, und de facto hatte da auch mehr oder weniger unbeschränkte Möglichkeiten, Lire zu emittieren, mit frisch emittierter Lire würde sie 320 Milliarden Euro kaufen und würde das, so stelle ich mir das vor, Herr Stark, Sie mögen mich korrigieren, wenn ich das zu laienhaft ausdrücke, würde das der Europäischen Zentralbank dann überweisen. Damit kommt also ein großer Schwung an Lire in Umlauf und die Lire wird gegenüber dem Euro abwerten, was ja wahrscheinlich auch der Sinn des ganzen Austritts ist. Also die Frage ist da eigentlich eine Bestrafung wirklich mit verbunden, mit dieser Rückzahlung? Ist das wirklich eine Drohung, die in gewisser Hinsicht glaubhaft ist? Ich möchte die Frage offen lassen. Ich weiß ehrlich gesagt keine ganz überzeugende Antwort darauf, aber mir ist nicht ganz klar, ob es wirklich so stark eine Drohung ist. Dritter Punkt dazu ist noch Auswirkungen auf Deutschland. Es hat jetzt Statements gegeben, die gesagt haben, na hurra, wenn die Deutschen aus dem Euro austreten, wir haben Target-Forderungen in der Größenordnung von 750 Milliarden Euro. Ein Kollege von mir hat das gestern auf irgendeinem Blog schnell ausgerechnet. Dann kriegen wir ja pro Nase 8.750 Euro von der Europäischen Zentralbank ausgezahlt, wenn die EZB unsere Target-Forderungen erfüllt. So ist es nun leider nicht. Ja, sondern die Deutsche Bundesbank hat zurzeit diese 750 Milliarden auf der Aktivseite in ihrer Bilanz stehen. Und diese 750 Milliarden würden eben, wenn tatsächlich die EZB die Target-Forderungen bedienen würde, und die Forderungen richten sich ja gegen die EZB, dann würde auf der Aktivseite der Bilanz der Deutschen Bundesbank die Target-Forderungen ersetzt werden, eben durch Devisenbestände in Euro. Das würde aber den Gewinn der Deutschen Bundesbank überhaupt nicht verändern. Und dementsprechend gäbe es auch keine erhöhte Ausschüttung der Deutschen Bundesbank an die deutsche Bundesregierung. Also es kommt nicht zu irgendwie einer Art von Extradividende für die Bundesbürger in der Größenordnung von 8.000 Euro und etwas mehr. Aber wir sind immerhin, wenn tatsächlich die Deutsche Bundesbank diese Überweisung der EZB erhält, das Problem los, was Hans-Werner Sinn als die Target-Falle beschrieben hat. Die Deutsche Bundesbank wäre also nicht einfach pleite und überschuldet, wenn sie sich aus dem Eurosystem lösen würde. Gleichwohl warne ich da vor übertriebenen Vorhaben auf deutscher Seite. Es ist ja vielleicht dem einen oder anderen bekannt. Ich glaube, ein deutscher Austritt ist nach wie vor etwas, was außerordentlich schwierig, ja mit großen Schäden für die Bundesrepublik Deutschland verbunden wäre. Ich stimme hier völlig mit Herrn Stark überein, dass der Ballast in der Eurozone anderweitig abgeworfen werden muss. Der deutsche Austritt, glaube ich, hätte durch Bilanzeffekte und durch Schwierigkeiten bei der technischen Umsetzung enorme Hindernisse zu überwinden, die ja, auch zu schweren Schäden in Deutschland führen könnten. Also da sollte man jetzt keine überschießenden Erwartungen haben.
Many thanks. We still have time for 2 questions from the room. Yes, please.
First of all, my congratulations for this organization. I think it's very important, and like Mr. van der Cloot said, what is being discussed here should not remain in this room, but should really go down to the population. And I think your initiative is very important. I think after what we heard here this morning, it is quite obvious that we have come into a situation where some governments of member states don't have the political courage anymore to take decisions, and then they say it's a problem for Europe. And now we are also in a situation where Europe, especially the European Commission, but also sometimes the European Parliament, comes into a situation, it's getting difficult, it's a problem for the central bank. So they have the central bank now is taking measures for which they don't have a real legal mandate. Now, actually, I'm very happy with that because as a manager of a trading company in Hong Kong and in Europe, I like very much this casino because it gives a lot of volatility and a lot of volume and a lot of liquidity. So thanks to this casino, I can pay for the university of my children. But I'm also thinking in the long term, and I think it's very obvious that I see no way out of the situation. As the three speakers said, directly or indirectly, actually the whole financial policy is a kind of doping, and how to get out of doping, I don't know. Now I would like to ask a question to the three speakers, and I think the answer can be quick, or at least I hope that the answer can be quick. I am absolutely not confident about the outcome. I think the only way is that it will explode, and history shows this. History shows that when we are coming into a financial crisis, the only way is to explode. So I would like to talk just 2 minutes about blockchain.
If Hervé, just because the time is...
Okay. I have never heard anything in the European Union, not in the European Parliament, not in the European Commission about blockchain. Now, I can tell you that the big investment banks in the world, I can tell you that the biggest investors in the world are working very hard on blockchain, because they are seeing that the system will explode and they want to be ready with a plan B. They are not talking about that because blockchain is against their own financial interests, but it's a plan B. I would like to know if you have any idea, or if there is any intention to try to develop this in Europe and make sure that, or avoid that again, we are 2 years late on America. Same like the quantitative easing, we have been late. Maybe it's time to work also on blockchain as an alternative. Just saying that Bitcoin has a bad reputation, but it's only one application of blockchains, and there are much more other applications of blockchain possible. Thank you.
The first question, how will we get out of this? A lot of people are always claiming, this will explode in next year, it will explode. And I have to explain that when a businessman is always buying stuff at a higher price than he is selling, he will close his doors very soon. But governments, they can tax you, and central banks, they can print money. I'm not saying that this can continue forever. I'm saying that this can continue longer than people often imagine. And it's very unsure how long. But I always also know that the main thinking in economics is Keynesian thinking. And it's short-term thinking. And they will, if they run into trouble, they will double down. We have too much debt. What we will do? We will have more debt to solve the problem of too many debt. So the doubling down means that then you have to make a theory about Ponzi. How long can Ponzi continue? Well, Ponzi, if you are a fraudster and we can put you in prison, then it can not last very long if you have a good legal system. But if it's the government itself and the central banks we are creating it, then it maybe can continue longer than we can imagine. With respect to blockchain, during the crisis, I contacted Herman Van Rompuy, president of the council at that moment, saying, for me it was a big disgrace that we were creating disaster zones in the Eurozone, in Greece, and that the European Commission had the obligation, the moral obligation, in my point of view, to create the possibility of complementary currencies. I discussed these things with Bernard Littard too, if people know him in the room, the big godfather of complementary currencies. We have this idea that we have a monoculture, that we have the euro. No, because of the euro, it makes even more sense to have also added to that local currencies. And it could have made a big difference to the lives, and still can, to the lives of ordinary Greek people and other people who are facing inhumane situations. So I'm all in favor of complementary currencies. We all also know that the central banks are very suspicious of competition. Until now, they have not outlawed blockchain or Bitcoin or other things, but we will see. We know that there will be these interesting times in that respect. Other?
Very brief on your last question on blockchain. It's very simple. There is no competition among currencies in the euro area, by definition, in the monetary union, and by definition, and according to the statutes and according to the treaty, the euro system, the ECB and national central banks have a monopoly on issuing the currency. So that's it. There's the monopoly. Yeah. You have to change the rules, you have to change law in order to allow competition. But this competition will come anyway, more or less via the internet, at least. On the first point, yes, you are absolutely right. There is some doping, and at least some financial market segments, but in particular governments, are addicted to the central bank's operations. So there is an interdependence between central banks, governments, and financial markets. And this is limiting or challenging the independence of the ECB and the euro system as such. On top of that, there is a close cooperation in a very subtle form. Close cooperation between governments and the ECB, a very subtle form of financial repression. To have higher nominal GDP growth, but and significantly lower interest rates. And this will help over time to reduce the debt to GDP ratio, not to cut debt, not to repay debt, just as an arithmetic result that the debt to GDP ratio will be reduced. And this is in the interest of all parties involved.
Verstehen Sie mich, wenn ich Deutsch spreche? Okay. Well, no, then I will respond in English. First, as far as virtual currencies are concerned, I personally are quite conservative in this respect. While virtual currencies as a means of electronic payment, I think, are perfectly legal, it is completely true what Jürgen Stark said, that the issuance of banknotes is reserved by our treaties to the European Central Bank, so there cannot be any kind of perfect competition. And I think there are good reasons for that, or at least I find those reasons good. I'm very suspicious of a money supply which is not in some way subject to control by an authority like a central bank. I believe that the supply of money and of liquidity should be adjusted over time to the path of the real economy, to the conditions of growth we have. And I just don't know, perhaps I'm not familiar enough with this new technology, how the supply of money is adjusted in a virtual currency system where, as I understand it, new money is evolving according to some type of algorithm which somebody has written. Well, I suspect that this algorithm does not pay respect to the economic conditions which we observe, but it is, an algorithm which somehow depends on computing capacities and things like these. And here, since I don't understand that, I just don't want to have this as our future currency. Plus, I'm skeptical of currency competition because I think that the more simple-minded people in a nation will not be able to cope with that. And they may be the ones, who eventually see they bear the losses, whereas the smarter people, they have invested in the right currency and they have saved their wealth. Now, the other issue you mentioned about sort of this type of explosion or catastrophe which is ahead of us. This may be so, it may be exaggerated the way you put it, we just don't know what the future brings. But you also mentioned the legal basis and the mandate. While we listened to the second speaker, I mentioned to Jürgen Stark that as an economist, I'm not really that much interested in what the mandate of the ECB states. I'm interested in good outcomes. And this, however, I have to sort of modify it a little bit by saying the good outcome is important, and I would be willing to change any mandate if I'm convinced that a different type of mandate delivers a better outcome. But I'm not convinced that changing the mandate of the ECB would in any way deliver better outcomes. Quite to the contrary. What we currently see is that the ECB overstretches its mandates, interferes greatly with the normal mechanisms of a market economy, to the point that actually property, for instance, is reduced by means of negative interest rates, to the point that the bearing of risk is encouraged despite the fact that the price for risk is very low, so that we have the danger of great misallocations, and to the point, of course, that the ECB interferes with economic policy decisions without having a democratic mandate. So all of that, I think, are very negative, adverse developments which result from overstretching the mandate, and this is why I'm very determined to keep the mandate of the ECB just as it is. We Germans are often criticized in the European Union as being obsessed with inflation. But here is a similar situation. We have the experience that inflation may give sort of, some easing, some softening of conditions, some easy remedy and relief in the short run, but we know that it has negative effects in the long run. And this is why we don't want the inflation. We want to stop it before it actually arises. And the same thing is true here for the ECB. I do not want the ECB to overstretch its mandate, even if the ECB argues, look, we have these 1.3 percentage points in 3 years or 1.5 percentage point in 3 years and nothing bad happened. I'm more worried about the long run developments, and whether it is really an explosion or a catastrophe, I don't know, but I think in the long run it is negative for our economy in Europe, and this is why I don't want it.